You said this week that you would support a bill banning bump stocks.
Most of us, I certainly never even heard of a bump stock until this tragedy. So, however that gets fixed, I'd probably support.
We can ban bump stocks. I'm an AR-15 owner, and the bump stock makes it truly an automatic weapon. I'm willing to take that off the table.
Just to mention the issue of bump stocks, I'm glad the president has said that those should be regulated.
So those are Republican senators in 2017 and 2018 supporting a ban on bump stocks, devices that effectively turn rifles into illegal machine guns. The push to ban the devices received broad bipartisan support after a shooter in Las Vegas used a bump stock to carry out the deadliest mass shooting in U.S. history. In response, then President Trump ordered the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives to ban them. But last week, the conservative majority on the U.S. Supreme Court struck down that Trump-era ban, ruling that any ban had to come from Congress. Now Republicans are blocking Democrats' effort to pass the very bipartisan gun reform that both parties endorsed just 6 years ago.
We need to pass my bill to ban bump stocks and do it now. This is the same bipartisan bill that I first introduced in 2018 in the aftermath of that shooting.
Is there objection?
I object.
Joining us now, New Mexico Democratic Senator Martin Heinrich, the lead sponsor on this latest effort to ban bump stocks. Senator, thank you for being here. I just wonder what explanation, if any, your Republican colleagues have given you for why they have changed their position so dramatically on bump stocks.
Alicia, if you don't mind, if I could right at the top, I would just ask your viewers to keep my constituents in mind tonight. We had a fire start last night, a wildfire that is ravaging New Mexico, and I have thousands of constituents out of their homes right now, and I would just ask everybody to keep them in their thoughts. The rationale doesn't make a lot of sense. It's basically that it's much more expansive than bump stocks. But we have a number of these devices now that would be regulated by this, things like Glock switches as well, that just turn semi-automatic firearms into automatic weapons. And that's not appropriate for the streets of this country.
Your colleague, Tim Scott, was asked about whether he still supports this legislation. I want to play that for you, get your reaction on the other side.
On bump stocks, would you now favor a Congress acting to ban bump stocks? You had said after that shooting in Las Vegas that if the vote came up, it would sail through Congress. So are you in favor of that ban right now?
Well, I'm strongly in support of the Second Amendment, but what we're going to do in the party, and
I asked about the ban on bump stocks, not the Second Amendment.
We're going to focus on the priorities of the American people, and what the priorities of the American people are today is to focus on closing our southern border.
And that, sir, is what we call a hard pivot. But there is, to me, so much telling in that pivot. What do you make of that response?
Well, I think that a lot of my colleagues are really reticent to take on the gun lobby at all. I'm a gun owner. I've been a gun owner almost my entire life. And these things just do not belong in the hands of civilians. They are effectively machine guns. We have lived in this country with a law against machine guns for almost 100 years. How this is in any way different is beyond me. And I think Justice Sotomayor said it in the dissent as well as anyone could. If something walks like a duck and swims like a duck and quacks like a duck, I'm going to say it's a duck. These are machine guns. They have no place on our streets.
Republicans, as I'm sure you know, are calling this a messaging bill. They're saying that asking for unanimous consent proves it's a stunt. Are Democrats going to move forward with a full floor vote on this, put every senator on the record on this issue?
I hope that the leader puts this on the floor. I think we should, we should make sure that the American people know where every one of us stands on such a common sense gun safety issue.
So speaking of where people stand on such a common sense issue, a spokesperson for the Trump campaign told NBC News that the Supreme Court's ruling, quote, should be respected. I just wonder what it says to you that Donald Trump won't even defend his own policy on this.
Well, and I think, what's clear is that Donald Trump picks and chooses when he respects a court. And I think all of us should bear that in mind as we go into the 2024 election.
I want to read you something. This is from the New York Times about the NRA's support for Trump's bump stock action back in 2018. They write, quote, the NRA supported an ATF review of bump stock devices, seemingly breaking with its usual practice of fiercely opposing any new restrictions on legal access to firearms. The association's chief lobbyist, Chris Cox, later bragged that the organization's actions had succeeded in slowing down momentum for legislative reform. Do you think the gun rights lobby was sort of always banking on the idea that the Supreme Court was going to kill this?
Yeah, I think there was this underlying strategy here, right? And unfortunately, what it may take to overcome this is the same pattern we've seen before, where it takes a complete tragedy on a huge scale to get people to do what is common sense.
Striking down this bump stock rule, of course, just the latest controversial decision from this court recently. President Biden, he broke his silence about the Supreme Court at a Democratic fundraiser. Take a listen.
The next president is likely to have 2 new Supreme Court nominees. 2 more. He's already appointed 2 that have been very negative in terms of the rights of individuals. The idea that if he's reelected, he's going to appoint 2 more flying flags upside down is really, I really mean it.
How do you set those stakes, Senator, for voters?
Well, I think people need to understand that this Supreme Court can take away your freedoms, and they have a history of, as they did in the Dobbs decision, coming right for the very freedoms that many Americans cherish the most. And that's what's at stake in this election is your freedom to choose, your freedom to vote, your freedom to feel safe in a movie theater or at your church. That's what's at stake in this election.
Democratic Senator Martin Heinrich of New Mexico, we will, as you suggested, keep your fellow statesmen in our thoughts. Thank you for joining us this evening.